Hello and welcome to the Houthi podcast, your guide to everything concerning the politics and business of the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. Welcome, dear listeners. My name is Katarina Somogyeva. I'm the head of Houthi, and my dear guests today are Dr. Erzsébet N. Rózsa.
Hello, good morning.
And Professor László Csicsmann.
Good morning. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us. Before the current Red Sea crisis, which broke out on October 19th, 2023, the issue of maritime choke points or bottlenecks was rarely discussed in mainstream media. Can you explain to our listeners what exactly they are, why they matter? Mr. Csicsmann.
There is a geopolitical contest going on worldwide, and especially for maritime trade, certain straits and canals are strategically located globally, and most of them are located in the Middle East. The most important ones are the Strait of Hormuz, which around accounts for 1/3 of world oil shipments still, so it's very important. We have the Bab el-Mandeb near Yemen and Somalia. It's very important to mention the Red Sea trade and the Suez Canal. Of course, we have the Strait of Gibraltar near Morocco, so it's dividing Europe and North Africa. And in Turkey, we have the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. So these are the most important ones. But besides that, we have the Panama Canal, we have the Strait of Malacca, and many others in East China, namely the South China Sea itself, with the territorial conflicts there, the Spratly and Paracel Islands, which is mainly claimed by China and other littoral states. In addition to that, we have the Strait of Taiwan, the entire East China Sea. So these are the most important global choke points today.
Since we are mainly concerned with regions of the Middle East and North Africa, which are the most crucial naval choke points in our region?
As my colleague László Csicsmann has just mentioned, interestingly, many choke points can be found in our wider region if we interpret the Middle East from the Atlantic Ocean to the Iranian-Afghani border. Gibraltar, of course, and the Bosporus and Dardanelles, both of them played a very big role in European history all through the centuries. It is enough to refer back to the maritime routes of trade going back to even before written times, to Phoenicians, Greeks, and so on. Interestingly, these choke points have been sometimes the openings to other areas. They have been strategically important because they were operating also as bridges through which you could come closer, like the Arab conquest of the Iberian Peninsula went through Gibraltar, the name still maintaining the name of Tariq ibn al-Aziz, the leader of the Arab forces. But the same goes for the Bosporus and Dardanelles. While it was a clearly, easily defendable place, at the same time, it was the connection between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. We all know from European history that this kind of coming and going, not only on mainland, but also on the sea, this maritime moving of peoples and trade and goods has meant and has resulted in a kind of a cosmopolitanism, at least in the Eastern Mediterranean. But we usually tend to forget that this happened elsewhere too, concretely in the Persian Gulf. Dr. Csicsmann has mentioned the Strait of Hormuz, which is the entrance or the choke point from the Arab Seas, Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf and vice versa. And why it is important nowadays? Because it's oil and oil and oil and the trade and shipping of oil. But as well, the next one on the other side of the Arab Peninsula, the Bab el-Mandeb, which is the entrance to and the exit from the Red Sea, the northern end of which is the Suez Canal. And we usually forget, or we usually are not aware of the fact that the Persian Gulf has also developed some kind of the coastline, the direct coastline, if you look at the population who are living there, it has also resulted in a kind of a cosmopolitanism, but towards India and even China. We also know about Chinese warfare or ships, or at least one or two historical campaigns which wanted to reach the Persian Gulf through the sea. So now, while historically it seemed to be only the movement of peoples and goods, nowadays it comes from this region. It is rather the exit from the Persian Gulf, mostly oil, but also gas in the form of LNG. And increasingly, ships are used for this end. So these are the ones with regard to our region. And again, it is a very interesting. It is on the one hand an entrance, on the other hand an exit. It is an opening, it is a bridge, and it is strategically important because a choke point can be very easily closed, like we hear it from time to time in difficult times for Iran in rhetoric that we will close down the Strait of Hormuz, or like we see now that some activities by the Houthis, if they not close down the Bab el-Mandeb, but practically because of some attacks, the ships would not take other routes and not risk their way through. So it is a very complex issue. You can close it, you can open it, but definitely you want to control it.
We have mentioned the Bab el-Mandeb Strait a couple of times. It has rarely been discussed before the recent Red Sea crisis. Can you explain us the strategic importance of this latter part of the world? Professor Csicsmann.
Yeah, as my colleague mentioned, that Bab el-Mandeb is the entrance to the Red Sea, which connects basically with the Suez Canal, the Mediterranean, and the Red Sea. And the main importance of this Bab el-Mandeb, it can shorten the trade route from Asia to Europe with at least 10 days, security-related, historically speaking. I mean, it was a more secure route than circumnavigating the entire Africa, which not only 10 days longer, but it can elevate the cost of trade as well. And one of the main principles of this liberal international order based on US hegemony was the free maritime trade, which was attacked by local rebel groups. And Red Sea, not only Bab el-Mandeb, but I would say Red Sea is getting more and more important and part of larger geopolitical context where we see some fault lines in the region, major littoral states fault lines like Egypt and Ethiopia, which is not a littoral state, but an important regional actor here. Over the Great Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, we have the Saudi-Iranian competition here as well, and the global competition because US, China, and many non-Red Sea states, external actors have been playing a very important role. Just to name a few of them from the region, Turkey, for instance, as well. Many European countries are there, and for instance, in the Red Sea, we have in Djibouti one of the only one Chinese military naval port here, which is very close to the American one, 70 kilometers from each other. And I think that's why it's a strategic point here. What we see recently is the Red Sea crisis. And in addition to that, we have the escalation in the Middle East. We have a drought in the Panama Canal, which resulted in decreasing of trade by 30 or 40% in the American continent. And in addition to that, we have the geopolitical contest over Taiwan. So it seems that the entire planet now is under a threat of closing down these global naval choke points. And many strategic thinkers are interested in to find alternative routes to maritime trade. But unfortunately, it's not easy to replace maritime trade. It's cheaper, safer, easier rather than the road routes. But just give you one example, which we discussed in a previous podcast as well, is the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, which, for instance, could be an alternative to the Bab el-Mandeb, especially even if the Strait of Hormuz will be closed, then definitely these projects are getting more and more important.
How successful can we consider the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, and what does this mean for world trade?
Well, definitely since the 7th of October, after that, the Houthis decided to attack all ships which related to the state of Israel with the destination or flags of Israel. So they attacked many ships, which means that the trade through the Bab el-Mandeb and Suez Canal dropped by around 40-50% this year in January. So it was, I think, a strategic decision for the Houthis because they signed a temporary ceasefire with Saudi Arabia in 2022 April. And especially it was because of the Saudi Arabia would like to save its global image and somehow not managed to achieve the goals in Yemen. The Houthis getting closer to Iran since the Saudi intervention in 2015, which was not only a Saudi but an international intervention, military intervention against the Houthi rebels. And United Arab Emirates, I would say, the second largest important actor in this military intervention. And the two countries, and there was a US pressure on them to stop this war because, of course, the US main concern was the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. And it's quite interesting to see that the Saudis stopped the conflict, that the Houthis perceive this ceasefire as they triumphed in this civil war. So they are, the winner, and especially interested in to have a share in any Yemeni political transition, which is on the table, but not implemented yet. And especially since 2022, the Houthis occupied more and more territories within Yemen. So the ceasefire with the Saudis doesn't mean the end of the civil war within Yemen. So the Houthis use this opportunity to enlarge their territories and the population as well, which was many times, especially in 2023, they had some difficulties and some unpopularity in Yemen, and especially to unite the population because they controlling not only the territories in North Yemen, but larger territories. They belong to a specific tribe and a Shiite group, but they even control larger territories, and they were very unpopular. And attacking northern ships and saying that we are fighting for the Palestinian state, it can help them to legitimize their share in the political transition, if there is any political transition. So I think this is the main strategic calculation behind the Houthi movement attack on the ships crossing the Bab el-Mandeb, the Red Sea.
In what ways do these events influence global maritime security and functioning? And for instance, are African ports capable of handling the increased traffic?
We see an increase of the traffic, especially as I mentioned, the route through Africa is 10 days longer, and they have not experienced such many ships crossing there. So definitely there was a logistical problem, and there is an economic problem too at the same time because some income, for instance, for Egypt dropped. And on the other hand, it's a longer way, so which means that extending the days of shipping, it means increasing the cost, and there is a logistics security related issue around Africa's ports, which of course, it's important. African countries could benefit from this, but I think only in the short term. So definitely it means somehow decreasing the global maritime trade because of, logistically there are not as many ships, and if one transport is longer 10 days, then the return is 10 days. So it has a huge impact right now on not only the security, but physically the trade itself.
And what does this all mean for an average Western consumer?
Delay in shipping, and the second is of course the increase of the price. I think this is and of course sometimes not only for the average consumer but for companies it's a risk of production because some materials not arriving in time, so it can have a huge effect of course. But as we've seen during the pandemic that a certain kind of adaptation started everything by all markets, I would say, but definitely it takes some time. And I have to say that today, in May, still the problem has not solved due to the fact that the United States launched this security force to protect the maritime trade, which means that some ships today crossing the Suez Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb, but however, it's very risky. Just a few days ago, there was a huge attack on one of the ships, and of course, it has a huge impact. So insurance is very high. It's a security point of view is a very risky thing to cross the Bab el-Mandeb at the moment. So most of the ships at that time decided to use the longer African way.
Another naval choke point in the region, which is a source of constant friction, is the Strait of Hormuz. Dr. Rózsa, what could you tell us about this geographical area?
Well, the Strait of Hormuz is the entrance to the Persian Gulf. On the one side of it, there is Iran, and on the other side, it's mostly the United Arab Emirates, which we have to mention that it is also not one country per se, but a United Arab Emirates, so several smaller sheikdoms. And there are some strategic islands also in the Strait of Hormuz, and this is where there is a territorial debate, because I think in the 1970s, still in the time of the Persian Shah, the Iranians occupied the Greater Tamb and the Lesser Tamb islands, which practically cannot be used for anything else but just a kind of give a strategic overview across the main shipping lines that are going through the Strait of Hormuz. Elsewhere, we mentioned there has been time and again threats from Iran that they would close down the Strait of Hormuz. However, this has not happened. Probably the closest we were to such an issue when, under the guidance of President Donald Trump, the US wanted to prevent all Iranian oil export going out from the Persian Gulf. As he famously said, not one drop of oil. This could not be long maintained, but however, for the Gulf Arab states and including Saudi Arabia, for the Gulf Arab states, it is vital that they can ship their oil and LNG, liquefied natural gas, out to the high seas. Interestingly, Saudi Arabia is in a geographic position that it has coastlines along the Persian Gulf and coastlines along the Red Sea. And when in 2019, the Saudi Arab oil field and oil refinery were attacked, the idea of building a pipeline across Saudi Arabia from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea has become strengthened, and they have conducted the building of such a pipeline, which in principle could solve a solution for the Saudis to avoid both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb. It could come as a piece of good news for Egypt, because then the way is out through the Suez Canal. And we have to bear in mind that a huge percentage of the Egyptian GDP is coming from the crossing fees of the Suez Canal, which is even more important because in the past 10 years, one of the signal Egyptian major project has been the widening, or to be more precise, to build a second track to the Suez Canal, which was and still is an issue of national pride, to the extent that the state issued bonds in a very, very minor amount. So let's say as if it was $1 per bond, and even the poorest bought bonds for this purpose. And now the bad news is that if the Bab el-Mandeb is unshippable, then there is no traffic through the Egyptian Suez Canal. The Egyptian economy would need that because it is very close to breaking down altogether. So one more reason. But it is also another interesting phenomena that in the Bab el-Mandeb, the Houthis, since there is this ceasefire agreement, as my colleague mentioned, are not attacking Saudi ships that are passing through the Bab el-Mandeb, which is an interesting phenomena. This may change, of course, if the situation is changing, but this is at the moment so. So definitely, yet again, these choke point issues and how to trade and how to ship seems to bring back to the agenda again a kind of a Persian Gulf security organization or agreement of some sort. This has been on and off the agenda in the past, let's say 50 years or so. And now it seems that this may give a new push to the realization of any such discussions, negotiations. And with the Iranian-Saudi agreement last March, that can be realized. And there is also one more very interesting thing. With the Houthi attacks that were started and really ships were targeted and hit, staff of the ship, sailors were taken into custody, sometimes by Houthis and so on and so forth. But the situation very clearly came to the point when it is enough for the Houthis to shoot at the ships. They don't even have to hit them. It's enough to stop trade altogether. As my colleague mentioned, the insurance charges going up very high. Ships would rather think it not even twice, but 3 or 4 times before they take this route. So now even the indication is enough that there is a possibility of such an attack to make trade and industry extremely cautious.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this very thrilling podcast on naval choke points. And I can't wait for all of our future podcasts together. Thank you, Dr. Erzsébet N. Rózsa.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Professor László Csicsmann.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Chayrion podcast. We are looking forward to sharing with you more exciting news on the politics and business of the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. For further information, please follow us at chayrion.com, as well as on X and LinkedIn.